The telegram arrived at the Silver Creek Ranch on a scorching July morning in 1882, and by noon, every ranch hand except one had saddled up and ridden out without collecting their final pay. Dust settled on the empty bunkhouse as Gideon Nash stood alone in the yard, his weathered hat pushed back on his head, watching the last of the cowards disappear over the ridge. He had worked plenty of spreads across Wyoming and Colorado in his 26 years, breaking horses and mending fences, and he had never seen grown men scatter like spooked cattle over something as simple as a change in ownership. The telegram had been brief, informing the foreman that old Samuel Whitmore had died in Denver 3 weeks prior, and that his daughter would be arriving to take possession of the ranch. The foreman had read it aloud in the mess hall that morning, and before the words had fully sunk in, chairs were scraping back and men were muttering about how they would not take orders from any woman, especially not some city girl who probably could not tell a stirrup from a saddle horn. Gideon had stayed seated, finishing his coffee while chaos erupted around him. He had known Samuel Whitmore, had respected the old man's fair dealings and straight talk. If Samuel had left his ranch to his daughter, then she must be capable enough, or at least deserving of a chance to prove herself. The other hands could run if they wanted. Gideon had nowhere better to be, and he had always preferred to judge people by their actions rather than assumptions. The ranch stretched across 2,000 acres of prime grazing land in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, with good water access from Silver Creek and sturdy buildings that Samuel had maintained with care. 300 head of cattle grazed in the summer pastures, and the horse stock included some of the finest quarter horses in the territory. It was a prosperous operation, but it required constant work and skilled hands to keep it running. Without a crew, the place would fall apart before winter set in. Gideon walked to the main house, a solid 2-story structure built from lodgepole pine with a wide front porch that offered views of the valley below. The foreman, a grizzled man named Pete Cochran, was loading his belongings onto a wagon. Pete had worked for Samuel for 15 years, but even he was leaving. "You are really going?" Gideon asked, leaning against the porch railing. Pete did not look up from his packing. "I am too old to start taking orders from a woman. Worked my whole life under men who knew cattle and horses. Not about to change now." "You do not know that she does not know cattle and horses. She has been living in Boston for the past 8 years, Pete said, finally meeting Gideon's eyes. "Samuel sent her east for schooling when she was 16. She is a city woman now, Nash. This place will be sold off within 6 months, mark my words. Best to find new work before the whole thing collapses." Gideon considered this. "Maybe she will surprise you." Pete shook his head and climbed onto the wagon seat. "You are wasting your time, but suit yourself." He snapped the reins and the wagon rolled down the drive, leaving Gideon alone with the wind and the distant lowing of cattle. The woman arrived 2 days later in a hired coach from Breckenridge, the nearest town with a rail connection. Gideon was repairing a section of corral fence when he heard the rattle of wheels on the drive. He set down his hammer and walked toward the main house, curious to finally see the woman who had caused such a stampede of cowardice. The coach door opened, and a woman stepped down, declining the driver's offered hand with a polite shake of her head. She was tall and lean, dressed in a practical dark blue traveling suit that was dusty from the long journey. Her hair, the color of rich mahogany, was pinned up in a simple style that framed a face with strong cheekbones and direct gray eyes that immediately scanned the property with an assessing gaze. She looked to be in her middle 20s, and there was nothing soft or uncertain in her bearing. "Miss Whitmore." Gideon removed his hat as he approached. She turned to him, and he saw a flicker of something, relief perhaps, cross her features before she schooled them back to neutral. I am Diana Whitmore, and you are Gideon Nash, madam. I work here. Worked here, he corrected, unsure of the present tense. Past or present, Mr. Nash? Present, if you will have me. She studied him for a long moment, taking in his work-worn clothes, the rope-scarred hands, the honest directness of his gaze. Where are the others? The telegram I sent said there were 12 hands working this ranch. They left, madam. Left. Her voice was controlled, but he heard the edge beneath it. When? Same day we got word you were coming. Diana Whitmore's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and she looked away toward the distant mountains. The coach driver was unloading her trunks, and she moved to help him, surprising both men by hefting one of the heavy cases herself. I can manage, she said when the driver protested. Please, take your payment from the cash box in my valise. After the driver departed, Diana stood in the yard surrounded by her luggage, looking at the ranch that was now hers. Gideon watched her, trying to gauge what she was thinking. Finally, she turned back to him. Why did you stay, Mr. Nash? He had thought about this question, knowing it would come. Your father was a good man, fair and honest. I figure his daughter deserves a chance to show if she is cut from the same cloth before I go making judgments. Something in her expression softened. Did you know him well? Well enough. I worked here 2 seasons before he went to Denver. He taught me about breeding horses, said I had a good eye for conformation. Diana nodded slowly. He wrote to me about you in his letters. He said there was a young man named Gideon who had a gift with the difficult horses, the ones others had given up on. Gideon felt an unexpected warmth at knowing Samuel had mentioned him. He was generous in his assessment. My father was many things, but generous with false praise was not one of them. She picked up one of her trunks. Help me carry these inside, and then we need to talk about the state of this ranch and what needs to be done. The main house smelled of dust and closed rooms. Diana moved through it with purpose, opening windows to let in fresh air, and Gideon saw her pause in the doorway of what must have been her father's study. Her hand rested briefly on the doorframe, and he thought he saw her shoulders tense, but she did not linger. They carried her belongings to what had been the master bedroom, and she directed him to set everything along one wall. Come down to the kitchen when you are ready, she said. We have work to discuss. Gideon went to the pump outside and washed the dust from his hands and face, then entered through the kitchen door. Diana had already started a fire in the stove and was filling a kettle with water. She had removed her jacket and rolled up her sleeves, and he noticed old calluses on her palms when she reached for cups from the cabinet. You have worked with your hands, he observed. I grew up on this ranch, Mr. Nash. I could ride before I could read, and I spent every summer until I was 16 helping with roundup and branding. My father did not believe in raising useless children. She set the cups on the table and gestured for him to sit. The question is not whether I can work. The question is whether one man and one woman can keep a 2,000-acre ranch running until I can hire a new crew. It will be hard, Gideon said honestly. We have got 300 head spread across the summer range. They need to be checked regular for injury and illness, moved to fresh grazing protected from predators. The hay meadows need cutting in another month. Fences need constant repair. The horses need training and exercise, and that is just the start. Diana sat across from him, her hands folded on the table. I know what needs doing. I grew up doing it, but I have been gone 8 years, and I know the men in this territory. They will not respect orders from a woman. They will not work for a woman. I saw that clearly enough when 12 experienced hands chose unemployment over giving me a chance. Then we hire whoever will work, and we prove them wrong. She looked at him sharply. I said I would stay and work for you, Miss Whitmore. I meant it. The kettle began to whistle, and Deanna rose to pour hot water over tea leaves she had found in the pantry. When she set his cup before him, their fingers brushed briefly, and he felt a jolt of awareness that surprised him. She pulled back quickly, taking her own cup and moving to stare out the window. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "My father and I had not spoken in nearly 2 years when he died. We had a falling out over my decision to stay in Boston, to pursue teaching rather than return here. He thought I was abandoning the ranch, abandoning him. I thought he was trying to control my life." Her voice caught slightly. "And now he is gone, and I never had the chance to tell him that I was wrong, that I should have come home." Gideon sipped his tea, letting her speak. "He left me this ranch because he had no one else, but also because he knew I loved it once. I am going to make this work, Mr. Nash. I am going to prove that his faith in me, however complicated it was not misplaced. I am going to build this place into something he would be proud of." "Then we better get started," Gideon said. "The cattle will not wait for us to finish feeling sorry for ourselves." She turned from the window, and he saw the ghost of a smile on her lips. "You are direct. Life is too short for pretty words when there is work to be done." They spent the rest of the afternoon taking inventory of the ranch. The cattle were scattered but healthy, the hay meadows were growing well, and the horses were in good condition. The buildings needed some minor repairs, but nothing urgent. The real problem was the sheer amount of work that needed to be done daily, work that usually required a dozen men. "We need to prioritize," Deanna said as they stood in the barn examining the tack. "What absolutely must be done and what can wait?" Gideon leaned against a stall door thinking. "The cattle need checking 3 times a week minimum. The horses need daily care and exercise. The milk cow needs tending. The chickens, the garden, fences are critical. We lose cattle through a broken fence and we lose income. Everything else, repairs to buildings, improvements, those can wait." "Can 2 people do all that? If we work dawn to dark and do not take any time off, maybe. It will wear us down eventually, though. We need help." Deanna nodded slowly. "I will ride into Breckenridge tomorrow and see if I can hire anyone. Even a couple of young men wanting to learn would help." The next morning, Deanna dressed in range clothes that had belonged to her father, pants, and a shirt that she had altered to fit her frame. Gideon saddled 2 horses, and they rode the 15 miles to Breckenridge together. The town was a mining community that had boomed in recent years with silver strikes, and the main street bustled with activity. They stopped at the general store first, and Gideon noticed how men's eyes followed Deanna, some with open hostility, others with curiosity. She ignored them all, conducting her business with quiet efficiency. At the land office, they posted a notice seeking experienced ranch hands, offering fair wages and accommodations. The clerk, a balding man with ink-stained fingers, read the notice and looked up at Deanna with barely concealed skepticism. "You are looking to hire hands for Silver Creek?" "I am. You know most men around here will not work for a woman. Then I will hire the ones who will." Deanna's voice was level, but Gideon heard steel beneath it. They visited the saloons and boarding houses, spreading word that they were hiring. Most men laughed openly when they heard a woman was running the ranch. A few were more polite in their refusals, but the answer was always the same. By late afternoon, they had not found a single person willing to work at Silver Creek. Deanna sat on a bench outside the assayer's office, frustration evident in the set of her shoulders. Gideon bought 2 meat pies from a street vendor and handed her one. "We will figure something out," he said. "Will we?" She took a bite of the pie without enthusiasm. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I should just sell the place and go back to Boston. "Is that what you want?" She looked at him, and he saw fire kindle in her gray eyes. "No, I want to make this work." I want to prove that a woman can run a ranch as well as any man. I want to honor my father's legacy, even if he and I did not part on good terms. Then we keep trying." They rode back to the ranch in the long summer twilight, and Gideon found himself acutely aware of Deanna beside him. She sat her horse with natural ease, moving with the animal's rhythm as though they were one entity. She had pulled her hair back in a single braid that hung down her back, and the fading light caught reddish highlights in the dark strands. She was beautiful, he realized, not in the delicate way of the painted women in the saloons, but in the way of the mountains themselves, strong and enduring and real. He pushed the thought aside. She was his employer, and she was dealing with enough complications without him adding his unwanted attention to the mix. Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Gideon woke before dawn and started the fire, fed the chickens and horses, and milked the cow. Deanna prepared breakfast, and they ate together in the kitchen, planning the day's work over coffee and biscuits. Then they split up, Gideon usually heading out to check fences and cattle while Deanna handled the horses and the garden. They met back at the house for a quick midday meal, then returned to work until dark. It was exhausting, relentless labor, but Gideon found himself enjoying it more than he had enjoyed anything in years. Working alongside Deanna was different from working with the rough men who usually made up ranch crews. She was competent and tireless, never complaining even when he knew she must be aching from the long days in the saddle. She was also smart, seeing solutions to problems that he might have missed, approaching challenges from angles he had not considered. And she was stubborn. When a particularly fractious mare refused to let anyone near her injured hoof, Deanna spent 3 hours in the corral, patient and calm, until the horse finally accepted her touch. When the creek threatened to flood during a heavy rainstorm, she worked alongside him through the night, building barriers and digging channels to divert the water. When supplies ran low and money was tight, she figured out how to stretch every dollar without compromising the quality of their operation. They talked while they worked, long conversations that ranged from practical matters to more personal territory. She told him about Boston, about teaching children in a school that served the poor neighborhoods, about feeling useful, but also feeling like she was living someone else's life. He told her about growing up on a struggling farm in Kansas, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 18, about drifting west and finding that he had a talent for understanding horses. "Why did you never settle anywhere?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, too tired to do anything but watch the stars emerge. "Never found a place that felt like home," he said. "Always seemed easier to keep moving. And now—" He looked at her, at the way the lamplight from inside the house touched her profile. "Starting to think maybe I was wrong about that." She met his gaze, and something unspoken passed between them. Then she looked away, and the moment dissolved into the summer night. In August, trouble arrived in the form of Marcus Devlin, a neighboring rancher whose spread bordered Silver Creek to the south. Devlin was a hard man with a reputation for running off smaller operations through intimidation and legal maneuvering. He rode up to the house one afternoon with 3 of his hands, all armed, and demanded to speak with the owner of Silver Creek. Diana came out onto the porch, and Gideon positioned himself slightly behind and to her right, his hand resting casually near his belt where his revolver hung. He had started wearing it regularly after they found cattle with cut fences and signs of deliberate harassment. "Mr. Devlin," Deanna said coolly, "what brings you to Silver Creek?" Devlin was a thick-shouldered man in his 40s with cold blue eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently set in a sneer. "Heard Samuel's daughter was trying to run this place. Wanted to see for myself if the rumors were true." They are true. I am Gideon Whitmore, and I own this ranch. Own it, maybe, but running it, that is a different story. Devlin leaned forward in his saddle. This is hard country, Miss Whitmore, not a place for a woman alone. I am prepared to make you a fair offer for your land and stock. You could walk away with enough money to live comfortably back east. I am not interested in selling. Devlin's expression hardened. You have got one man working for you. One. You cannot maintain an operation this size without proper help, and you will not get proper help because no man with any sense works for a woman. By winter, you will be ruined. Sell now while you can still get a decent price. I said I am not interested. Diana's voice remained steady. Now, if you will excuse us, we have work to do. You are making a mistake, Devlin said, his tone now openly threatening. This territory does not tolerate fools, and women who think they can do men's work are the biggest fools of all. Gideon stepped forward. Miss Whitmore has asked you to leave. I suggest you honor that request. Devlin's eyes shifted to him, assessing. Nash is not it. You are throwing away your future on a lost cause. When this place fails, you will wish you had taken my advice. I will take my chances. Devlin studied them both for a long moment, then wheeled his horse around. Do not say I did not warn you, he called back as he and his men rode away. After they disappeared, Diana let out a long breath. That was Marcus Devlin. My father wrote about him. He has been trying to buy Silver Creek for years. He is not going to give up easy, Gideon said. Men like that do not take no for an answer. Then he is going to have to learn. But Devlin's prediction began to come true as summer faded into autumn. Despite their best efforts, they could not keep up with all the work. Fences fell into disrepair faster than they could fix them. Cattle strayed onto neighboring lands. The hay harvest was only half of what it should have been, because they lacked the manpower to cut and stack it all before the weather turned. And the isolation began to wear on both of them, the endless days of backbreaking work with no respite, no social interaction beyond each other. Gideon could see the strain in Diana's face, the way her shoulders slumped at the end of each day. She never complained, but he knew she was reaching her limit. He was reaching his own limit too, though he would never admit it. His body ached constantly, and he woke each morning feeling like he had not slept at all. It was late September when Diana injured herself. They were moving a small herd of cattle to lower pasture, and a young bull suddenly charged. Diana's horse spooked and reared, throwing her hard onto rocky ground. Gideon dismounted and ran to her, finding her conscious but clearly in pain, clutching her left arm. "Do not move," he said, kneeling beside her. "Let me check for broken bones." Her face was pale, and he could see she was trying not to cry out as he gently examined her arm. It was not broken but badly sprained, and there were scrapes and bruises across her shoulder and back. "Can you ride?" he asked. "I have to ride. We cannot leave the cattle." "Forget the cattle." "You are hurt." "Gideon, we cannot afford to lose them." He wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. They could not afford to lose anything at this point. He helped her back onto her horse, and together they finished moving the herd, though it took twice as long with Diana unable to use her left arm effectively. Back at the ranch, he insisted she sit while he heated water and gathered clean cloth for bandages. He had learned basic medical care over the years, injuries being common in ranch work, and he cleaned and wrapped her wounds with steady hands. She hissed in pain but did not pull away. "You need to rest this arm for at least a week," he said as he tied off the bandage. "We do not have a week." Diana. It was the first time he had used her given name, and they both noticed. "You are going to hurt yourself worse if you do not rest. I can handle things for a few days. One man cannot run this ranch alone. We have established that already. Then we will do what we can and let the rest wait." She looked up at him, and he saw tears of frustration glittering in her eyes. "I am failing, Gideon. My father left me this ranch, and I am running it into the ground." Without thinking, he reached out and cupped her cheek with his hand. "You are not failing. You are fighting against impossible odds with more courage than any man I have known. Your father would be proud of you." A tear escaped and ran down her cheek. He wiped it away with his thumb, and suddenly the air between them changed, became charged with awareness. Her lips parted, and he found himself leaning closer, drawn by something stronger than logic or propriety. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when she responded, her good hand coming up to grip his shirt, it deepened into something urgent and necessary. They broke apart after a long moment, both breathing hard. "I should not have done that," Gideon said, though he made no move to pull away. "Why not? You are my employer. You have enough complications without me taking advantage." Diana laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. "Taking advantage? Gideon, you are the only person who has stood by me when everyone else ran. You have worked yourself nearly to death trying to help me save this place. If anything, I am taking advantage of you." "That is not how I see it." She met his eyes steadily. "How do you see it?" He struggled for words. "I see a woman who is braver and stronger than anyone I have met. I see someone who fights for what she believes in, who does not give up even when the odds are stacked against her. I see someone I have come to care about more than is probably wise. And I see a man who kept his word when he had every reason to break it, who works with honor and treats me as an equal, not as something fragile or incapable, who makes me feel less alone." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I have come to care about you too, Gideon. More than I should, given everything." They sat in silence for a moment, the admission hanging between them. Then Diana winced, her injured arm reminding them both of the present reality. "You need rest," Gideon said, helping her to her feet. "Go lie down. I will bring you something for the pain and fix dinner." "Gideon," he turned back, "thank you. For everything." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and watched her climb the stairs to her room. The next week tested them both. Diana tried to rest but found it nearly impossible, pacing the house while Gideon worked outside. He managed the essential tasks but had to let others slide, and he could see the ranch slipping further into disorder. Diana's arm healed slowly, and as soon as she could move it without crying out, she insisted on returning to work despite his protests. They were struggling to repair a section of fence near the north pasture when they heard riders approaching. Gideon's hand went instinctively to his gun, relaxing only slightly when he saw it was not Devlin's men. 3 cowboys approached, young men in their early 20s with the weathered look of experienced ranch hands. The leader, a lanky man with sandy hair, raised his hand in greeting. "Afternoon. We are looking for Diana Whitmore. Heard she might be hiring." Diana stepped forward, surprised. "I am Diana Whitmore, and yes, I am looking for hands. But I should tell you up front, I am the owner and boss of this ranch. If that is a problem for you, best to say so now." The sandy-haired man glanced at his companions, then shrugged. "Miss Whitmore, we just came from working for Marcus Devlin. He is a bastard, pardon my language, who treats his men like dirt and his cattle worse. We quit 2 days ago and heard in town that you were desperate for help. Figure any boss has got to be better than Devlin, man or woman." "What are your names?" Diana asked. "I am Jake Brennan. This here is Tommy Rodriguez and Chris Faulkner. We have all been working cattle since we were kids. We can ride, rope, brand, and do pretty much any ranch work you need." Diana looked at Gideon, who studied the 3 men carefully. They looked competent enough, and his instincts said they were telling the truth about leaving Devlin. He gave her a slight nod. "Wages are $40 a month plus room and board," Diana said. Work is dawn to dark every day. Winter will be hard, spring harder. I treat my people fair, but I expect honest work and no insubordination. You take orders from me or from Gideon Nash here, my foreman. Those terms acceptable?" Jake grinned. "More than acceptable, madam. When do we start?" "Right now. Grab some tools and help us finish this fence line." The addition of 3 experienced hands transformed Silver Creek. Work that had seemed impossible with just 2 people became manageable. The fences were repaired, the cattle were properly tended, and the buildings received needed maintenance. The new hands worked hard and treated Diana with respect, and Gideon watched her confidence grow as she proved herself capable of directing a crew. But the respite was short-lived. In early October, half their cattle disappeared overnight. Gideon and the hands found the broken fence where they had been driven through, and the tracks led straight toward Devlin's land. Diana's face was white with fury when Gideon reported the theft. "He is trying to force me to sell," she said. "Take enough cattle and I will not have the income to survive winter." "We could report it to the sheriff," Jake suggested. "The sheriff is in Devlin's pocket," Diana said bitterly. "Everyone knows it. We would be wasting our time." "Then what do we do?" Tommy asked. Diana looked at Gideon. "We get them back." That night, Gideon, Diana, and the 3 hands rode to Devlin's ranch under cover of darkness. They found their cattle, still bearing Silver Creek's brand, penned in a distant corral. 2 guards watched the pen, smoking and talking in low voices. "We cannot just start a gunfight," Gideon whispered. "Someone will get killed." "We do not have to fight," Diana said. "We just have to be smarter than they are." She outlined a plan quickly. Chris would create a distraction on the far side of the ranch buildings, drawing the guards away. While they were gone, the rest of them would open the corral and drive the cattle out, moving them quickly back towards Silver Creek land. It worked perfectly. Chris set fire to a hay rick, and when the alarm was raised, the guards ran to help fight the blaze. Jake and Tommy opened the corral while Gideon and Diana positioned themselves to direct the cattle. Within minutes, they had the herd moving, pushing them hard through the darkness back toward their own land. They heard shouts behind them as Devlin's men discovered the theft, but by then they had too much of a head start. They drove the cattle across the property line and kept going until they reached Silver Creek's main pasture, then quickly repaired the fence behind them. Dawn was breaking as they rode back to the ranch house, exhausted but triumphant. Diana was laughing, her face flushed with adrenaline, and Gideon thought he had never seen her look more alive. "We did it," she said, still breathless. "We actually did it." "Devlin is not going to let this go," Gideon warned. "He will retaliate. Let him try. I am done being pushed around." Devlin came himself 2 days later with a dozen armed men, but this time Diana was ready. She had sent word to the other smaller ranchers in the area, telling them what Devlin had done. 6 of them showed up at Silver Creek, along with their hands, creating a force large enough to give Devlin pause. "You stole my cattle," Devlin snarled at Diana from his saddle. "I recovered my stolen property," Diana corrected calmly. "They bear my brand. If you want to dispute that, we can bring in a neutral party to arbitrate. You have no proof I took them." "I have the broken fence and tracks leading straight to your land. I have witnesses who saw them in your corral, and I have neighbors here who are willing to testify to your pattern of harassment and theft." Diana gestured to the assembled ranchers. "You have been pushing around smaller operations for years, Devlin. It stops now." Devlin looked around at the assembled group, clearly calculating his odds. Finally, he jerked his reins, turning his horse. "This is not over, Whitmore." "Yes, it is, unless you want me to file formal charges with the territorial court." "I may not have the local sheriff in my pocket, but I do have a lawyer in Denver who would love to take this case." Devlin rode away, and the gathered ranchers let out a collective cheer. As they dispersed, several came to shake Deanna's hand and welcome her officially to the community. An older man named Henry Watts clapped her on the shoulder. "Your father was a good man, and you are his daughter through and through. You need anything, any of us, you just ask. We take care of our own around here." After everyone left, Deanna sagged against the porch railing. Gideon moved to her side and she leaned into him naturally. He wrapped his arm around her waist and they stood together watching the sun set over the mountains. "Did that really just happen?" she asked quietly. "It did. You faced down the biggest bully in the territory and won. We won. I could not have done any of this without you." He turned her to face him. "Deanna, I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, waiting. "I love you. I think I started falling in love with you that first day when you lifted your own trunk and told the coach driver you could manage. I tried to keep it professional, but I cannot anymore. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and I want to be by your side not just as your foreman but as your partner in everything." Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I have been afraid to say it, afraid it would complicate everything, but life is too short and uncertain to hide how I feel. You make me stronger, Gideon. You make me believe I can do anything." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, pouring months of suppressed longing into it. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and grinning like fools. "So what do we do now?" Deanna asked. "I suppose we should think about making this permanent. If you will have me, I would like to marry you. Are you sure?" Being married to the woman boss of a ranch might not be what you imagined for yourself. "I did not imagine any of this, but I cannot imagine anything better. I do not care what anyone thinks. I want to spend my life with you, building this ranch, building a future together." Deanna's smile was radiant. "Then yes. Yes, I will marry you." They wed in November, a simple ceremony in Breckenridge with Jake, Tommy, Chris, and several of their neighboring ranchers as witnesses. Deanna wore a simple dress of cream-colored wool, and Gideon wore his best suit, bought specially for the occasion. The circuit judge who performed the ceremony remarked that he had never seen a bride and groom look at each other with such obvious devotion. Winter came hard that year, testing the ranch and everyone on it. But with Gideon at her side as both husband and partner, Deanna faced every challenge with confidence. They worked together seamlessly, his strength complementing hers, their different perspectives creating solutions neither could have found alone. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire in the main house, Gideon gave Deanna a gift wrapped in plain brown paper. She opened it to find a wooden sign, beautifully carved and painted. "Silver Creek Ranch," she read aloud. "Diana and Gideon Nash, proprietors. Wanted everyone to know this is ours," Gideon said. "Together." She set the sign aside carefully and moved into his arms. "I do not need a sign to know that, but I love it. We will hang it over the gate in the spring." "Speaking of spring," Gideon said hesitantly, "I have been thinking. If we are going to grow this place, make it what it could be, we should think about the future, about family." Deanna pulled back to look at him. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying I want children with you someday. Not right away, there is no rush, but someday. I want to build something that lasts, something we can pass on." She kissed him softly. "I want that too. A family, a legacy, a life filled with love and purpose. All of it with you." Spring brought renewed energy and purpose to Silver Creek. The cattle survived the winter in good condition, and the early calving season was successful. Deanna and Gideon worked side by side, training new horses, expanding their breeding program, and slowly improving the ranch's profitability. In May, Diana discovered she was pregnant. She told Gideon one evening as they walked along the creek that gave the ranch its name, the water running high with snowmelt. "I saw the doctor in town today," she said, trying to keep her voice casual. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect. I am going to have a baby, Gideon." In late December or early January. He stopped walking and stared at her, his face cycling through shock, joy, and wonder. Then he let out a whoop of pure happiness and picked her up, spinning her around before carefully setting her down again. "Sorry, should I not have done that?" "I do not want to hurt the baby," she laughed. "The baby is fine, I am fine, better than fine." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to be parents. Are you ready for that, with you? I am ready for anything." The pregnancy progressed without complication, and Deanna continued working on the ranch, adjusting her duties as her body changed. The ranch hands were protective and helpful, taking on heavier tasks without being asked. Jake took to bringing her wildflowers, claiming his sister had said pregnant women needed beauty around them. Tommy carved a cradle from cottonwood, working on it in the evenings by lamplight. Chris donated his own baby blanket, carefully preserved by his mother, saying it had brought him luck and should go to the new little one. Gideon was attentive to the point of being overprotective, but Diana managed him with gentle humor. When he tried to prevent her from riding in her 6th month, she reminded him that ranch women had been having babies for generations while still doing their work. They compromised, with her limiting her riding to shorter trips on gentler horses. In December, as snow began to fall in earnest, Deanna's labor began. Gideon sent Chris racing to Breckenridge to fetch the midwife while he stayed with Deanna, holding her hand and trying to hide his terror. The midwife, a competent woman named Mrs. Carson, arrived and took charge of the situation, sending Gideon out of the room despite his protests. "First-time fathers are more trouble than they are worth during delivery," she said firmly. "You can pace downstairs like every other man and wait to be called." The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Gideon wore a path in the kitchen floor, drinking coffee that Jake kept making and trying not to imagine all the things that could go wrong. When he finally heard a baby's cry from upstairs, he nearly knocked over a chair in his rush for the stairs. Mrs. Carson met him at the bedroom door. "You have a son, Mr. Nash. A big, healthy boy, and your wife did beautifully." Gideon entered the room to find Deanna propped up against pillows, exhausted but smiling, holding a bundle wrapped in Chris's lucky blanket. He moved to her side and looked down at his son's red, squalling face. "He is perfect," Gideon said, his voice rough with emotion. "He has your nose," Deanna said, touching the baby's tiny face with one finger. "Poor kid," she laughed weakly. "I think it is a very nice nose. What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never settled on anything definite. Gideon looked at his son, at his wife, at the home they had built together against all odds. "What about Samuel, after your father?" Diana's eyes filled with tears. "Samuel, yes, Samuel Nash. He would have loved that." "He would have loved you," Gideon corrected. "He would have been so proud of everything you have accomplished." They sat together, the three of them, as snow fell softly outside and the ranch settled into winter quiet. It was a moment of perfect peace, perfect happiness, the culmination of everything they had fought for and everything they had found in each other. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. Silver Creek prospered under Deanna and Gideon's joint management, becoming known throughout the territory for the quality of their horses and cattle. They earned respect not despite Diana's position as co-owner and active manager, but because of the undeniable success of their operation. They had 3 more children over the next 7 years, 2 daughters and another son. Samuel grew into a serious boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. The eldest daughter, Grace, had Diana's gray eyes and fearless spirit. The younger daughter, Rose, was gentle and thoughtful, preferring books to riding. The youngest son, Lucas, was pure mischief from the moment he could crawl. Jake, Tommy, and Chris remained with the ranch, becoming not just employees but family. Jake eventually married a schoolteacher from Breckenridge and built a house on Silver Creek land. Tommy sent money back to his family in New Mexico and brought his younger siblings to work on the ranch when they were old enough. Chris married late, to a widow with 3 children, and Gideon and Deanna stood as witnesses at his wedding. The ranch expanded gradually, acquiring additional land when smaller operations sold out. Deanna implemented progressive management techniques she had read about, including rotational grazing and selective breeding programs. Gideon's gift with horses made Silver Creek mounts sought after throughout Colorado and Wyoming. They faced challenges, of course. Harsh winters, dry summers, fluctuating cattle prices, injuries, and illness. But they faced everything together, their partnership only growing stronger with time. They learned to anticipate each other's thoughts, to work in harmony even during disagreements, to find joy in both the triumphs and the everyday moments. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Gideon surprised Diana with a trip to Denver. They stayed in a hotel, attended the theater, and dined in restaurants, playing at being city folk for 3 days. But both were relieved to return to the ranch, to the life they had built. "I do not need fancy things," Deanna said as they rode up the familiar drive, seeing their children racing out to greet them. "This is everything I ever wanted." Gideon reached over and took her hand. "Everything I never knew I needed until I found it. You ever regret staying? When all the other hands left, you could have gone too. You could have found easier work, a simpler life." "Not for 1 second. Staying was the best decision I ever made. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." She smiled, the same smile that had caught his heart that first day when she stepped out of the coach and surveyed her inheritance with determined eyes. "I love you, Gideon Nash. I love you, Deanna Nash." Their children reached them then, full of stories about what had happened during the 3 days they had been gone, and they dismounted to gather their family close. The ranch stretched around them, the mountains rose in the distance, and the creek sang its eternal song over smooth stones. It was home. It was family. It was everything they had fought for and everything they had found in each other. And it was only the beginning of a legacy that would endure for generations, built on the foundation of a woman's courage and a cowboy's faith, and the love that had grown between them against all odds in the wild, beautiful heart of the Colorado mountains. Years continued to flow like the creek for which their ranch was named, each season bringing its own rhythm and challenges. Samuel, their eldest, proved to have inherited both his mother's head for business and his father's way with horses. By the time he was 16, he was training colts that sold for premium prices, and ranchers came from as far as Montana to buy Silver Creek horses. Grace, true to her fearless nature, became the best rider on the ranch, able to stay on horses that threw grown men. She also had a sharp mind for numbers, and helped Deanna manage the ranch's finances, catching errors and finding ways to maximize profits that even her mother had missed. Neighbors whispered that it was unseemly for a girl to be so involved in business, but Diana ignored them, remembering too well the prejudices she had faced herself. Rose surprised everyone by becoming fascinated with animal husbandry and veterinary care. She read every book on the subject she could find, ordered more from Denver and Chicago, and began treating minor injuries and illnesses on the ranch with remarkable success. Gideon built her a small surgery room in one of the outbuildings, and by the time she was 14, neighboring ranchers were asking for her help with their animals. Lucas, the youngest, inherited his father's wandering spirit. He loved the ranch, but was always curious about what lay beyond the mountains. Gideon recognized himself in his youngest son and did not try to cage that restlessness, knowing it would either burn itself out or lead Lucas to find his own path. In 1893, when Silver Creek celebrated its 11th year under Diana's ownership, the ranch hosted a summer gathering that became the talk of the territory. Over 100 people attended, including ranchers, townspeople, and even some of the businessmen from Denver who bought Silver Creek cattle. Diana and Gideon stood together greeting guests, their children helping serve food and drink, and everyone remarked on what a fine family they made. Marcus Devlin, notably, did not attend. His own ranch had struggled over the years, plagued by poor management and his unwillingness to adapt to changing markets. He had been forced to sell off portions of his land, and there were rumors he was considering selling the rest and moving to California. Diana felt no triumph in his misfortune, only relief that he was no longer a threat. That evening, as the celebration wound down and the last guests departed, Diana stood on the porch looking out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. Gideon came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Thinking deep thoughts?" he asked. "Thinking about that first day," she said. "When I stepped off that coach and saw this place in such disarray, with all the hands gone and only you standing there. I was terrified, Gideon, absolutely terrified that I would fail. You did not fail. You built something amazing. We built something amazing," she corrected. "I could never have done it without you. You believed in me when no one else did, when I barely believed in myself." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I believed in you because I saw who you were from the first moment. Strong, determined, capable. All I did was stay and help. You did the hard part. The hard part was admitting I needed help. Accepting that I could not do everything alone." She touched his face, tracing the lines that time and sun had etched there. "You taught me that partnership is not weakness, that asking for help, accepting support, does not diminish what I accomplished. And you taught me what home means. What it means to commit to something, to someone, to build a life instead of drifting from place to place." He kissed her forehead. "You gave me a purpose, Diana. You gave me everything." They stood together in the warm summer darkness, the ranch quiet around them, their children asleep inside. It was one of thousands of such moments they had shared over the years, and Diana knew there would be thousands more. That was what marriage was, she had learned. Not the grand gestures or dramatic moments, but the quiet accumulation of shared experiences, the daily choice to stand together against whatever came. "Come to bed," Gideon said softly. "Tomorrow will be another long day." "Tomorrow will be perfect," Diana said, taking his hand. "Just like today. Just like every day with you." As they entered the house, the sign Gideon had made years ago swung gently in the breeze above the gate, proclaiming to all who passed that Silver Creek ranch belonged to Diana and Gideon Nash. It was more than a name on wood. It was a testament to perseverance, to courage, to the power of partnership and love. The ranch would continue to thrive for generations, passing from Diana and Gideon to their children and their children's children. The story of how a woman boss had been abandoned by her crew, except for one faithful cowboy, and how that cowboy's loyalty had blossomed into love, would become legend in the territory. People would tell it around campfires and dinner tables, adding embellishments with each telling. But the truth was simpler and more profound than any legend. It was the story of two people who had taken a chance on each other when the world said they should not, who had worked side by side to build something that mattered, who had chosen love over prejudice and partnership over pride, who had proven that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay when everyone else leaves. In the years to come, when Diana was old and her hair had turned silver, she would sit on that same porch and tell her grandchildren about the day she arrived at Silver Creek, to find it empty except for one cowboy who had said he would stay and work for her. Her grandchildren would listen with wide eyes, unable to imagine a time when people thought women could not run ranches, unable to imagine their formidable grandmother ever facing such doubt. And Gideon, seated beside her with her hand in his, would add his own memories. The moment he first saw her step down from that coach, chin high despite the disaster she faced, the first time she smiled at him, the first kiss, the birth of their children, the 1,000 ordinary miracles that made up a shared life, did you know right away that you loved her? One grandchild would ask. Gideon would consider the question seriously, as he considered all questions. I knew right away that she was special, that she was worth staying for. The love came gradually, like watching the sun rise. Each day a little brighter, a little warmer, until suddenly you cannot imagine life without that light. And Grandma, did you know you loved him right away? Diana would laugh, the sound still bright despite her years. I knew he was aggravating and stubborn and too honorable for his own good. But I also knew he saw me, really saw me, not as a woman trying to do a man's job, but as a person trying to do the right thing. That was rare and precious. The love grew from that recognition, from that respect. Do you have any regrets? Another grandchild would ask. Diana and Gideon would look at each other, that silent communication that came from decades together, and they would answer in unison. Not a single one. And it would be true. Despite the hardships, the prejudice, the backbreaking work and lean years, despite every obstacle they had faced, they had no regrets. They had built a life together that honored both their individual strengths and their shared dreams. They had raised children who knew the value of hard work and treating people with fairness. They had proven that love and respect were the true foundations of any partnership, whether in marriage or business. Silver Creek Ranch stood as testament to what was possible when courage met opportunity, when determination met support, when love met trust. It was more than land and cattle and horses. It was a legacy of hope, a reminder that the old ways were not always the best ways, and that progress often came from the most unexpected sources. The cowboys who had quit that first day, who had refused to work for a woman boss, disappeared into history, their names forgotten. But Gideon Nash, the cowboy who had stayed, became a legend alongside his wife. Not because he had saved her, for Diana Whitmore Nash needed no saving, but because he had recognized her strength and chosen to stand beside it, to add his own strength to hers, creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. That was the true story of Silver Creek Ranch. Not just a tale of the Wild West, but a timeless story of partnership and love, of courage and commitment, of two people who found in each other exactly what they needed to face an uncertain future. They had taken the hand they were dealt and played it with skill and heart, transforming adversity into opportunity and loneliness into family. The ranch endured long after Diana and Gideon were gone, their descendants maintaining the traditions they had established and the values they had exemplified. The sign above the gate was replaced when the original weathered beyond repair, but each new version bore the same proud declaration. Silver Creek Ranch, founded by Diana and Gideon Nash, a place where vision met determination and love conquered all. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the pines and the creek sang its eternal song, some said you could still feel their presence, not as ghosts, but as a lingering warmth, a sense of rightness and home. The love they had built into every fence post and pasture, every carefully chosen breeding line and hard-won improvement, remained woven into the very fabric of the place. It was a legacy worth having, a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating. And it all began with a telegram. 12 cowards who ran away, and one cowboy who had the wisdom and courage to stay.